Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. Yeah, still coughing a bit, Ger, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully we'll get through this. We'll talk about Ulster in a moment, but should we talk about Owen Farrell and his tackle first? I know this was one of the things coming out of the Premiership this weekend. I hadn't seen the video, and we were talking about it pre-show, and I was like, oh, it's fairly typical. And I was like, oh, was it one of those tackles where he leads with his arm? And I was like, yeah, exactly, that's exactly it. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, I've seen this tackle from Owen Farrell a lot. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think it's obviously there's so much talk about the reducing the tackle height and players' shoulder to head and the neck area. I think on Friday night, for anyone who didn't see it, 74th minute, he's at the side of a ruck on Farrell against Gloucester, and Jack Clement, one of the Gloucester players, picks it around the side, and Owen Farrell looks to make the tackle, and there's a shoulder to the neck and the chin, clear contact. And I think probably the frustrating part about this is, with the new World Rugby directives that have come into place since the 1st of January, one of those directives was to try and speed up the TMO process and hurry things on a little bit, because there's a lot of time being lost in the game, players walking into lineouts, penalty kicks, conversions, all that kind of stuff. So I think the referee, Carl Dixon, maybe had that in his mind, and he was asking the TMO, was it in the previous phase of play? And if it was, we can't go back and look at it. And Claire Hodnott was the TMO. She said she wasn't sure. It was about 6 phases before the ball hadn't gone out of play, so they should have went back and looked at it, and they didn't. And obviously, if you see it, you see the thing live on the TV or see it afterwards. I think it's a clear red card, and I suppose it could be significant. He may be cited yet. He plays on the last 5 or 6 minutes and gets a drop goal when the clock is in the red to win it for Saracens. And it just kind of highlights, even at this stage, that it shouldn't be happening. It should have been dealt with on the field, and the referee, Carl Dixon, and the TMO, there was a lack of communication there. And look, maybe he will be cited. I'm not advocating for players to be cited and sent off and all that kind of stuff, but I think there has to be consistency across the game with the shoulder contact to above the neck and the head area. And this was a clear one where it should have been dealt with.
Yeah.
It could have been a yellow. There was no arm wrap there, and he's a very physical player, and he's a brilliant player, and he's a top bloke as well. But we're trying to change the behaviours in the game right across the board, and this wasn't dealt with, and he got away with one, really, and Saracens got away with one, and essentially England got away with one, unless he's cited.
Yeah, and as of yet, we're still waiting to see. It looks like he probably will more than likely get away with it. Sexton got away with one last week, though, right?
He did, and you asked me that, and he ends up breaking his jaw, and went for an operation. But I think the more you look back in that, and we've seen, the onus is on the tackling player, to drop their body height, not the ball carrier. And we saw one previously where Cian Healy, against Ulster, he got sent off for it and then got the red card changed or rescinded. It's difficult on the tackling player when their body height is that high and they receive the tackle. But it's very clear for me and for anyone listening or watching, when you're the tackle player, if your last movement is forward towards the opposition, that's when you're in kind of dangerous territory. If you're absorbing the tackle, it's a little bit different. But looking back at Johnny Sexton's one, he could have easily have got a yellow or possibly a red from that tackle.
On the Farrell incident, Quinny, is it the TMO's? Is it a calamity of errors? Like, the TMO eventually says
Yes.
it to Carl Dixon, the referee, but of course time has passed on. The referee then says too much time has passed for him to do anything about it and go back and review it. Like, in football, you'd imagine if there's a foul, the game plays on, and even if it's 4 or 5 minutes later when the ball stays in play, the referee will still give the card at the end of that phase of play. But
Yeah.
should the referee have gone back regardless, no matter how much time had passed?
Yeah, and I think there is a bit of confusion around that, and the TMO called it. Gloucester went up the field. There was 6 phases later. They ended up getting into the Saracens 22, and that's where Carl Dixon was asking, was it previous phase of play where the ball went out of play? So I think what they're being told now in directives, if it plays on for a minute or two and the ball goes out of play and restarts again with a line out or a scrum or a kickoff or a 22 dropout or whatever, that you shouldn't go back that far. But that would indicate it's up to the TMO to kind of pick these things up on the go. They have to be clear and obvious, and you got to tell the referee that. So he deals with it really quickly, and we're not looking at replays and constant delays on whether it's foul play or not foul play. There was a total breakdown of communication here. And, this is a game that's on TV that everybody's watching, loads of Irish people watching this game as well. Obviously, big audience across the UK, so everyone can see it. And it's not, I think what it shouldn't really happen that this kind of breakdown happens, the breakdown in communication happens, but that's exactly essentially what happened, and it wasn't reviewed. And Gloucester were really frustrated, I think, in the end. And
well, a whole league title can be decided on decisions like this. The whole notion as well that these old decisions, they all even themselves up over the year. They don't. Like, massive mistakes get made and you never recover from them, and careers get, I'm not saying in this instance that's the case, but like, good quality refereeing isn't that hard to sort out, especially when they have so many people watching stuff. And there was at least a conversation about this. They should have taken their time over it. It's potentially game changing, and it turned out it would have been completely game changing.
And Carl Dixon said, look, if it's in the previous phases of play where the game had restarted, and the citing officer will look after it. But I just think it's really important that, with the new directives, and we've seen a lot of the games so far, the referees telling players to speed up the kicks. You have 60 seconds for a penalty from the time it was awarded, or the time you indicate you're having a shot at goals. 90 seconds from a try being scored to take the conversion. Slow play is going to be penalised. So if you're walking into lineouts, all those things are good. But the one thing, Jerry, you think it's kind of like VAR in soccer. You don't really mind how long it takes if you're the supporting team or if it affects both sides, these decisions, if they get it right. And for me, the foul play, or was the try scored, the TMO stuff, I don't care if you're waiting 5-10 minutes for that, as long as you get the right call. And I know World Rugby are trying to speed up the game, and that came from a conference that they had with all the different coaches in World Rugby, which is to be applauded, because the game is stop-start enough. But this TMO stuff and Friday night, it was clearly wrong. And what would worry me more, again, this isn't about the individual, because honestly, he's a great player and a brilliant fella. But if this goes and there is no citing and it's not looked at, it's wrong, really. You know.
Okay, we should move on, because we need to talk about Ulster. We had O'Gara on, obviously, on Friday morning, and you were gently probing about how the game was going to go against Toulouse at the weekend. They absolutely hammered Toulouse, 30 points to 7 in the top 14. It's their first win against Toulouse, I think, since 2019. So they're in very good form, which is exactly what Ulster don't need heading into the next game, which is against La Rochelle. This is, we talk week on week about Ulster over the last 5-6 weeks, basically since the second half collapse against Leinster in that game that you were talking about, Cian Healy's red card. Something is rotten in Ulster at the moment, and where do you start?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a real lack of confidence has seeped in, and certain areas of their game that they were very strong at are now, we're not seeing it. Their maul was really strong at the start of the season. They were scoring lots of tries. Their forwards were putting a big squeeze in the opposition. Teams have obviously negated that. And look, let's be honest, Benetton away with all their internationals are a tough fixture. So, in fairness to Ulster, they've had an incredibly difficult run with a lot of away games. I think last week was kind of summed up where they're at, in that Munster game. And then they get themselves back. They take the lead in 77th minute against Benetton after playing poorly for particularly the first half. And then John Cooney gets penalised, and Rhino Smith, the Benetton fullback, kicks a penalty to win the game. They just look deflated. They look like a side that are kind of lost in a sense. They're lacking a little bit of energy. They're showing glimpses of what they can do, and I've said this throughout this really tough period. It's their 5th loss in 6 games. That certain things they can do are very exciting, but there's something wrong, as you say, and there is a bit of a crisis there now, and they're going through a really difficult period. Those
glimpses, Quinny, of positive shoots from Ulster, and Dan McFarlane mentioned the fact that they came back from 20-15 down and got that 1 point lead again, albeit then Cooney's cut offside and they give the late penalty away to lose the game. But are there any positives to be seen from Ulster at the moment, even performance wise?
I'm not sure. It's hard to find them. I think the character look was and we can probably overplay the confidence thing. I think the character they showed to come back and get themselves in that position to go ahead. And all teams need those kind of moments where they're going through a bad run and suddenly they turn it around and get a result on the road. And this was one they needed. But I just think they didn't manage the game. Their game management at times is really, really poor. I think, they had a couple, and Dan McFarlane spoke about this in the Munster game, their entry points into the opposition 22. They had so many of them against Munster and came back out, got turned over, didn't get scores. So that would indicate there's a ruthless kind of dominant edge missing there. I think the Eric O'Sullivan try after 8 minutes was a real positive. McCluskey made a real powerful carry. They won the line out. He made a real powerful carry, play a couple of phases. Nick Timoney, big carry around the corner. And then, they come back in field and score a really, really good try. And you think it's dominant, aggressive, direct rugby. And I think when they play like that, I think they can get more out of the team. I think they've got into a state of believing that they can run around teams and they can cut them open with their backline. And when teams are defending well against them, I think they're having issues. But the positive is, I suppose they have the talent. They have some really good players, but they're not gelling together and playing like a team. And in saying that, I said it at the start, Shane, they've had a really dreadful run of games as well. And it's been really tough for them when you go back to, away from Sale, away to Sale, away to Leinster, away to Sale, home to a really powerful La Rochelle side. Then they're away to Connacht. Really tough run of fixtures. The Munster game at home, that's the one you think they're going to win, and they're going to win handsomely. And then they're away on the road again to Benetton. So it's been a really tough run. And obviously they're off to La Rochelle now, so it doesn't get any easier.
But that's the ball game. Like, Ulster are supposed to be building a team capable of reaching semi-finals of all the competitions they enter in. They don't lack for resources. They don't lack for talent in terms of the players we think are supposed to be good. But it's interesting how so few of them have actually made Ireland squads and made Ireland teams and are outperforming. There's very few of those players who make it to the Ireland squad and then overachieve. There's been a few instances in recent years where that's happened. But like that back row, we thought that, Lowry might make it, Balakoon might have a place nailed down in the team. They haven't kicked on. And I wonder, is that because the culture in the playing pool is wrong, or the culture in the management is wrong, or the culture in the whole operation is wrong at the moment?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's hard to put your finger on it, but I think there's a lack of leadership there, and reality of rolling up the sleeves and really dogging out games. You mentioned those players in the backline. James Hume is an incredibly talented player. Balakoon, and what he did in the game the other day was really impressive. I think he still has that bit of X factor. Mike Lowry got a great try. He's trying a lot, but they're just lacking energy as well. So there's something not right there. And who knows? I like Dan McFarland. I think he's, by and large, up to this point, you could say that, there was a certain amount of excitement and progression from this Ulster group. They could have been in a URC final last summer, and possibly could have won it if they got there. So they were very unlucky against the Stormers right at the death in the semi-final. So they're coming up short a lot. I think it's quite frustrating for Ulster fans, and it's a clear indicator of the type of player and the level the players are at when they're being picked for Ireland. And there we say it, it's constant Leinster players doing simple things really well, building into a system, looking full of energy, flair, quality all the time. And the other provinces are striving for that kind of a setup. And you think Ulster are the ones that are kind of the nearest and the ones who can challenge at the moment a little bit more. But they've gone backwards in the last few weeks. So there's something not clicking there. In saying that, all sports teams have these kind of bad runs, and it can be difficult. And that's where you need good leaders to kind of help and take over. And one result can change things. So it's a really difficult game going to La Rochelle at the weekend. But, they've got to kind of roll the sleeves up this week and hope something happens for them, because, Sale at home the following week, they could be out of Europe, and most probably will be out of Europe in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. Okay, I do want to move on, because the speculation in the papers linking Malcolm Marx, the Springbok hooker, with Munster. If one big name South African signing comes in, does this mean RG Snyman won't be there next season? Can you have both in the team at the same time?
No, you can have both, I think, and they've been linked with Malcolm Marx on a few occasions before. He's obviously a fantastic player and would be another big marquee signing, and it's an area that, aside from Niall Scannell and Diarmuid Byrne and Scott Buckley, they need a little bit more depth there and top quality power and physicality. They're not going to be able to sign international tight and international hooker. So maybe if Malcolm Marx comes in, he certainly helps the scrum situation a little bit. He offers a little bit more depth there to Niall Scannell and Diarmuid Byrne, who are very good players, but you feel it's an area that Munster need to strengthen and get more depth, because when it comes to the business end of matches, I think their scrum has creaked a little bit. Go back to that game against Toulouse, the quarterfinal in the Aviva, and that's where all the trouble and issues they had in that game popped up. And sometimes people think it's just the props you need big props to scrummage, but no, the hooker is vital as well, and he's a very strong scrummager, Malcolm Marx. So he would certainly add to any team. And if they get a little bit of luck with getting Snyman back, who's back running now, and get some games, they could have a decent run towards the end of the season. But
so you think
someone like Malcolm Marx,
you think they'd both be in the team next season? A couple of things, right? First off, if Marx is being linked this heavily, it'd be unusual for that to be hijacked by somebody else. It feels like if it's leaking out at this point, it's leaking out because there's good information. Is that your instinct about this?
No, I didn't really speak to anyone, I think, about it. I think he has been linked before, and I know that they were trying to get him. You would think that he would have a conversation with RG Snyman. I think with Johan van Graan leaving, Damien Dialende leaving as well, would that affect the possibility of more someone like him coming in? But I think there's nothing concrete. I think obviously Malachi Fekitoa hasn't played a lot, so they're the kind of two marquee signings, Snyman and Fekitoa. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but maybe they would have to, release Malachi Fekitoa if Malcolm Marx came in. But they can't make any decision about RG Snyman until he gets back. And obviously, if he plays the rest of the season and has a run, he has another year after that. And I said it at the time, for him signing that extension was obviously, it was great loyalty out of him, but it was loyalty out of Munster, giving him the opportunity as well. And I know from people who've spoken to him, and he wants to try and repay Munster a little bit and get back and play. But Malcolm Marks would be a great signing from, yes.
We should give Connacht a mention as well, Quinny. I mean, it was a depleted Sharks team, albeit in the 24-12 win down in the sports ground. Weather was fairly torrid as well, it has to be said. But regardless of the maybe different Sharks team compared to the Sharks team that beat the Bulls recently, still a good win. And interestingly, Andy Friend quite heavily praising the 3G pitch afterwards. Turns out this new pitch is very much doing things in favour of Connacht.
Yeah, well, this is what they spoke about and the reason they got the pitch there, being to be able to, play their high tempo, fast tempo game in tough conditions. And the weather was horrendous there as well. They're up to 11th now, and we said it on Friday, Shane, didn't we? How the importance of not just a win here, but possibly a bonus point win. There's no doubt the Sharks sent a weak inside, which is a pity in a sense, but it's them trying to manage their squad as well with the travel and the matches they have coming up. Leinster were very comfortable. I think they had to deal with, still the physicality and the only way you can deal with that, and we saw it in the Munster performance against the Lions, is pace, tempo, fitness, all that kind of stuff. And Connacht managed the game very, very well and threatened and had some lovely scores. And, a 24-0 job was done. And I think they switched off a little bit. There was an obvious reaction from the Sharks, but a really, really important win against a side that could cause you problems. They certainly would cause you problems if they had their full team out. But Andy Friend would have been pleased with the job and the rugby they played as well. And the 4G pitch did make a huge difference because they were able to move that Sharks side around a lot, and they got some great tries.
Does it take the piss out of the tournament a little bit, Quinny, Sharks taking such a weakened squad, or can you understand from their perspective?
I can understand. I think they're down in 9th. They've only played 10 games. They've lost 4. So I think they're, with the quality they have and the depth they have and all the South African internationals, they're potential winners of this competition. And it's kind of strange to say that after 12 games, a team down in 9th can win it, but they can. So, it's trying to manage them and we've seen the Irish provinces rotate a lot over the years, and sometimes to the frustration of the English teams in the Premiership and stuff like that. So it's a pity that they changed so many players in a sense that you would think if they made 4 or 5 changes and had some on the bench and stuff like that. But I think they were kind of thrown in the towel a little bit. But this was a game that you'd really fancy the Sharks to go to Galway and win if they had their full side. Well, they could probably go anywhere and win because they're so strong. So we haven't seen much of that, and we've been praising the URC a lot and the quality of teams that have been selected throughout and the standard of the games. But certainly that one on Saturday was a bit of a mismatch, and the Sharks lacked a lot of quality there, but kind of got the job done, and I think really important for them, as we said on Friday.
Leinster pretty much got the job done against Ospreys as well. Not a vintage Leinster performance, but an opportunity for some of the younger players to get minutes, with the exception maybe of Dan Sheehan, who wasn't supposed to get as many minutes, came off after 51 minutes and went straight back on again when his replacement got injured, and he ended up doing 77 minutes, which isn't ideal preparation for your number one hooker this close to the Six Nations.
No, and I'm every time I see Dan Sheehan, I'm saying, is he playing again and again and again? Such a brilliant player. And Leinster did struggle at the start, and it was a very strong Ospreys side. They picked up vast majority of their internationals. Tipperick was captain, Alan Quinlan was there. Thomas Francis in the tight end, Nicky Smith. So they did a lot of power and a lot of quality there. But Leinster just keep kind of getting the results, and I think the start of the game was poor for them. They gave up a soft try to Keelan Giles. Brilliantly worked try up the short side, but you talk about the confidence and the body language and all that kind of stuff, and their work rate is just through the roof. And the tries from Hugo Keenan and Jimmy O'Brien kind of summed up where they're at, their execution and their lines of running. There were 2 brilliant tries. that effectively won the game from us. Sheehan gets one in the first half, which is, on 36 minutes, it's Charlie Natai up the middle, and they just literally come back blindside with a wide pass to Dan Sheehan and his footwork. So they were brilliant scorers, and it's a brilliant win, but it wasn't a vintage performance, and it was one that they struggled in at periods of time. But it's 12 on the bounce now, isn't it? So it was from their point of view a very pleasing win away from home with lots of changes and lots of young players in there.
Yeah, Harry Byrne started. There was a clamour for us to see Harry Byrne play for Ireland, and we kind of all wanted to see what that would be like. That clamour has died down, and from his perspective, he just needs to get some game time and try and re-establish himself as a pretender, even, or a contender in that conversation, because he's not in that conversation at the moment at all, is he?
Just needs a run of games, Ger. You need to play and you need to be involved in kind of big moments in matches. I think it was a game where he had some really good moments, but they were under a lot of pressure and they struggled, Leinster at times, and they really had to dog it out. So for your fly half, and so often we see the halfbacks for Leinster getting an armchair ride with what's happening in front of them. He has undoubted quality, Harry Byrne. He's a big physical player, and he just needs to play a number of games. Playing one every 3 or 4 weeks, it's very hard to get any sort of rhythm and flow. But I'm sure he will come back into the conversation again, because he has the quality to do that.
Johnny Sexton's going to be fit now, it looks like, for the Six Nations.
All this backup talk was for nothing, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be rushing him back, would you?
No, exactly. Give everybody else the chance in this, see what they're capable of doing, and then go, okay, we actually have depth. Or put Sexton in, and as Sexton goes, all our eggs are in the Johnny Sexton basket.
The only thing is the player himself, if there's any sort of chance that he will be fit.
He wants to play, yeah.
He wants to play, of course. He hasn't played a huge amount of rugby this season. But we'll wait and see. I think, if he didn't play, it wouldn't be a bad thing for Ireland, because going to Cardiff first up is going to be really difficult. Warren Gatland, the Warren Gatland effect and all that kind of stuff. And they'll really see Ireland as a massive scalp if they could beat them there. So they'll make it really difficult. And you'd love to see Johnny Sexton there win the game and for them to have a good Six Nations. But I don't feel it's an imperative. It's the most important thing in the world. I think he needs to be minded, not wrapped in cotton wool like you said before, Ger, which you probably do if you could.
Oh yeah, give him 4 months off.
Yeah. But look, it'd be a big boost if he was back around the squad and back training with them anyway, because he is the captain and he's great leadership qualities.
All right, Quinny, we leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Thanks, lad.